Hi, this is Shira Rubinoff. I'm here with Don Smith, Vice President, Threat Research at SecureWorks. Don, it's a pleasure to be with you here today.
It's a pleasure to be with you too, Shira.
Thank you. So, Don, lots to talk about today. First, I'd like to talk about more of the threat landscape. So, what do you think are the most notable trends in the criminal threat landscape from the past 6 to 12 months? And we know it's been changing, up and down, lots of different things. What would you say the last 6 months have shown us?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's probably two main things I would focus on. Ransomware is the omnipresent threat that people need to be concerned with. And there's actually been quite a significant shift in the way that these crews operate, actually since Colonial Pipeline. And importantly for cyber defenders, what we're seeing is that the initial infection vector, the way in the bad guys are using, has changed a lot in the last 18 months. So of the incidents our incident response team have responded to, 50% of them have been unpatched internet-facing infrastructure as the initial infection vector, 40% incomplete deployment of multi-factor auth or credential replay. So that 90% of the incidents we're responding to with ransomware can be addressed by some fairly basic security controls. And I think that's been driven by the changes in the landscape where smaller organizations are being targeted, although I use that term very, very loosely, rather than the larger organizations that drew some fire towards the bad guys. That kind of evolution, where there may be players that have less resources at their disposal, is going to drive them to scan and exploit and drive them to buying credentials or access on the dark web. And we've seen a parallel rise in info stealers, which has been fueled by the demand for access from initial access brokers to give to ransomware crews. The second thing, very briefly, I would draw people's attentions to is that anytime there's times of economic strife, fraud goes up. And we have seen that increase in our incident response engagements around business email compromise. So it will not surprise me at all if we see an increase in kind of email focused fraud, invoice redirection scams in the coming 6 to 12 months.
Oh, that's very interesting. And I like the fact you highlighted that smaller organizations may be targeted more or be more susceptible. I think even brushing up on basic cyber hygiene can obliterate a lot of that. And organizations need to understand if it's not when, it's not if, it's when. When will this happen? Are you ready? And what you're doing to be prepared both proactively and reactively. And, people talk all about the state actors. How about the hostile state actors? What are you seeing specifically from them? What are they coming at us with? And what are their ways that they're penetrating organizations?
Yeah, so I guess the first statement is nothing new here, nothing new to see move along. We're seeing the same old malware, even PlugX coming along. There's been actually a good few reports of PlugX on USB sticks recently, and this is something actually we've been seeing for 3 or 4 years in different parts of the globe. I think the two things I would focus on that are not perhaps different, but ongoing and worth drawing attention to is threat actors building in-country access tiers. They've taken a leaf out of the criminals' book. The big botnets for years have used compromised computers and compromised SOHO routers as the first tier of their command and control channels. And we see the nation state actors now doing that, which also avoids that first hop going across a transatlantic circuit or something like that, where it may be observed by people who are looking there. So that's an evolution which has been ongoing for a while, but is becoming kind of more prevalent. And then the other one, which has been ongoing for a long time too, is subverting authentication systems. So 10 years ago, we dealt with Skeleton Key at an NGO, which was a full authentication bypass for Active Directory. More recently, well, maybe not that recently, Iron Twilight or Fancy Bear was cutting persistent OAuth tokens to keep access to email inboxes. And we see just a sustained focus from hostile state actors on subverting authentication systems. And it's obvious why. A lot of corporate data these days is in the cloud, it's in people's inboxes, it's not behind the perimeter. So subverting authentication systems, that is the new perimeter, definitely.
So we've spoken about what we saw in the past 6 to 12 months, the different type of attacks that we were seeing pretty much one after the other. And as things are changing, the attack surface is that much greater, the speed of the attacks are that much quicker. What would you say are more predictions? I know you shared some with us, but more prevalent ones, that you'll see in the next 6 to 12 months that you think should be on everyone's radar?
Yeah, I think so. We'll continue to see the ransomware landscape evolve. Bad guys will still continue to want to make money. I think it will become more fractured. And I think we will see more smaller organizations impacted. And ransomware could indeed, sadly, become endemic, where it doesn't draw the attention it once did because of partial encryption events. It's a very long time since I've seen an incident where a large multi-site enterprise was knocked over on all of its sites. These days, the bad guys are encrypting where they land, asking for a little bit less money and moving on. So I think we'll continue to see that. We'll continue to see increased fraud levels whilst things are a bit tight economically for people. And then the bit that I hope we don't see, and so far we haven't, is any collateral from things that are going on in Ukraine. So far, everything has been super measured. I think the kind of laws of mutually assured destruction have kept everyone safe. But anyone who works in the same kind of world that we all work in knows that you've constantly looking over your shoulder to work out, is something going to trigger the Russians into doing something nasty, something not Petya-like. So that stress is going to be omnipresent on security professionals whilst the conflict is ongoing.
That's certainly important information. I think it really highlights the piece of being massively proactive as well reactive in the cybersecurity posture from every level. And we talk a lot in the security space about sharing of information stronger together rather than sitting in our own silo. And I'm curious your thoughts around how organizations and corporations, how do they share with other organizations, public or private, when it comes to threat intelligence? Obviously, everybody has their own secret sauce and there's specific things they keep to themselves, but what areas can we share with each other to make us stronger against the bad actors and make us less of a target for nation states?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think a lot of people believe that raw threat intelligence should be shared broadly, and there's definitely an argument for that. I think some of the guidance which I've mentioned already, patch things that face the internet, implement multi-factor auth, the kind of derived understanding of what we see from the incidents that we investigate is probably the most important thing to share, because that turns itself into practical guidance for network defenders. At a different level, it's important that cybersecurity companies share with each other. It's important that we share the attacks we're seeing, the tradecraft we're seeing with law enforcement and government. And it's equally important that government steps forward and is in a place where they can declassify things and share them with people who can create an effect to better defend customers and society more broadly. And I'm happy to say I see all of these things happening successfully. Often if you look on, InfoSec Twitter, you ask yourself, where is the information sharing? It's happening all the time. It's happening in a sort of a shell-like structure, and there will be cybersecurity companies talking to each other one-on-one. There'll be little groups with focus areas, with individual researchers talking. Obviously, at SecureWorks, we're in the JCDC, so we work very closely with CISA and with many other bodies internationally. There's a huge amount of information and intelligence sharing going on. It's just not happening in public. And I'm pleased to say that CISA, JCDC, the US government, and I speak as a non-US citizen, have been super forward-leaning and has done a fantastic job with the setup that's there. It's definitely going to make America safer.
No, thank you for that. And if you could share with our audience, there's lots of different ways people could protect themselves from all sorts of threats, and specifically the ones that we highlighted during our conversation. What would you say maybe are the top 3 ways organizations can protect themselves against threats from the outside bad actors, nation states, and even internally from their own, let's call it human factors piece, where they should, tie it up quickly with some good cyber hygiene? What would you say are some top points?
Yeah, well, this isn't going to be earth-shattering. I'm a notorious pragmatist. First of all, it is know what you're defending, because if you don't know what you're defending, you can't defend it. The number of times we've seen intrusions where somebody said, oh, I didn't realize we still had that site in Mexico, and that's how the bad guys came in. So the general health and cleanliness and understanding of your infrastructure and where all your stuff is absolutely paramount. It is table stakes. Then work out what it is that are your crown jewels, how you're going to protect it, make sure the infrastructure around it is patched. And then obviously the authentication regimes, instrument where everything is, and then work with some vendor, preferably us, but it could be anyone, to make sure that you are making sense of all the telemetry that you have so you can detect people further down the kill chain if they get past your initial defenses. And none of this is rocket science. I've been doing this stuff for 30 years. The thing we have to guard against is buying snake oil and promises that are not actually helping you pragmatically move the needle in terms of security. Sadly, good security is quite boring in many ways, which is why I think we don't do very well often.
No, I like the way you highlighted that. And it's important organizations understand there's no one size fits all. Really understand your organization, know the culture makeup, know your data, know your information, know where it sits, know who has access to it. The points you highlighted are so critical. And when somebody would speak to it, it would be, well, that's obvious. Unfortunately, a lot of the obvious or a lot of the things that we deal with in the security space are overlooked because they're not dealt with on a proper level. So Don, thank you so much for your information share and for the points and tips you gave our audience. This has been a very interesting conversation, and I very much look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.